en ese momento, de todas las personas que están a mi alrededor, del Wall donde trabajo, era que me quedara en silencio, no respondiera nada, que no alimentase de ninguna manera el odio, ¿no? Pero el odio parecía justamente muy bien alimentado por sí mismo y sus dejetos me atacaban infinitamente en mis cajas de mensajes, aunque yo mal pudiera mirarlas, estaba tratando de evitar la náusea de tanta barbaridad, ¿no? Me orientaban también a no sufrir, a no dejarme sentir, porque esa sería la intención de los agresores, pero yo sufría y no conseguía dejar de sentir, y poco a poco fui ganando una conciencia de que sentir era imprescindible. Ese era el imperativo en ese momento, para mí y para todos. Tanto como yo, el país necesitaba darse cuenta de que sufre y parar de aceptar ese sufrimiento, parar de aceptar una forma extrema de violencia, una forma más de violencia, que es esa viciosa virulencia que ya tomó parte de todo el debate público, ¿no? Otro aspecto de los más extraños que me llamaba la atención en ese primer momento era que mientras en las redes sociales de la extrema derecha miles y miles vociferaban contra mí y trataban de decretar mi prisión o mi muerte con esa parca autoridad de sus voces, en mis círculos más cercanos casi nadie sabía de nada, ¿no? Todo eso pasaba en una realidad aparte, eran dos mundos completamente separados, burbujas de informaciones y de relaciones que parecían no mantener ningún contacto. Eso hacía aún más extraña la experiencia de violencia, casi onírica, impalpable, agravando la impresión de soledad y de desamparo. Hacía también más incierta mi propia vivencia en el mundo real, más dudosa la relación entre la virtualidad y el mundo concreto. En una calle, en un aeropuerto, en un avión, tenía yo que desconfiar de un posible odio de quien estuviera a mi lado, tenía que protegerme de algo. Era necesario en ese momento encontrar un punto máximo de cautela, pero que no se convirtiera en paranoia, y eso me recomendaban varios, pero siendo preferible casi en ese momento no intercambiar miradas, no dialogar. Y me preguntaba igual cómo sería posible dialogar con un desconocido si aparece para insultarme o agredirme, si nuestros mundos están tan desconectados, si no hay un piso común entre nosotros, ¿no? Y mientras tanto, en el ámbito virtual, las cosas se hacían cada vez más graves, los mensajes se tornaban cada vez más violentos, ganando otros matices como rabiosos y xenofóbicos, incluso mandándome volver a Argentina, de donde viene mi familia, y describiendo a veces en detalles mi suplicio futuro, ese tipo de cosas. Y en ese momento llegó una amenaza más seria, más grave, que los que acompañaban conmigo evaluaron así, que era un hombre con un documento militar que se presentaba oficialmente y mandaba fotos con armas pesadas y me decía que, bueno, me iba a matar a mí y a mi familia, ¿no? En ese momento fue que cambió la estrategia. Ahora no era más el silencio lo que me cabía hacer, sino una reacción, una toma de posición en público, una acusación, y ese momento justamente cambió todo, ¿no? La historia se hizo totalmente distinta, el tono del relato se altera, se hace menos sombrío, me parece, porque fue impresionante en ese momento la red de apoyo y solidaridad que súbitamente se constituyó, el cariño, la fuerza que empezaron a llegar de varios lugares, de varios lados, dentro y fuera del país, una especie de torrente poderosa contrapuesta a la primera y mucho más vital, más firme. Entonces, si en el primer momento ya contaba con la ayuda de amigos, de editores, de la gente que me ayuda en esas cosas, en ese segundo momento me di cuenta de la existencia de una serie de grupos e instituciones en defensa de la cultura, del periodismo, la libertad de prensa, los derechos humanos, y grupos que luchan día a día para justamente oponerse a la brutalidad, a la violencia que existe de tantas formas, ¿no? Y me di cuenta también que esa historia no tiene nada de individual, nada de excepcional o de atípica en Brasil, porque junto con los mensajes de apoyo recibí también innúmeros relatos de violencias similares enfrentadas en los más diversos contextos, casi siempre en situaciones de mayor desamparo y vulnerabilidad, ¿no? En cada parte de Brasil, real y virtual, hay una perseguición brutal del pensamiento divergente, una forma de cercenar libertades, no tanto por vías oficiales como fue en mi caso, en alguna medida, pero difundida como un ataque mezquino y cotidiano contra cada uno y contra todos. Sentí que el bolsonarismo hizo del país un lugar más feroz, más bárbaro, más cruel, y que todos vivimos de alguna manera las consecuencias de esa corrosión. Ignorar o minimizar ese estado de cosas, naturalizando la violencia y aceptándola como parte del embate, no me parece ninguna solución. Es nuestra rendición a la brutalidad, nuestra entrega colectiva a la soledad y al desamparo. Me parece mucho más fundamental en este momento afirmar una recusa terminante a esta violencia corrosiva, con un grito que no puede ser solitario, en un grito común en que todos, que me protejo yo y todos nos protegemos, en esa colectividad que cambia el tono de la historia, ¿no? Estamos juntos, aunque a distancia, tenemos que estar juntos para combatir un grado tan extremo de perversidad. Sufrimos y para mí eso está muy claro, es importante admitir que sufrimos, que sentimos ese dolor comunitario que está en esa violencia y que se propaga desde esa violencia. Me parece muy necesario sentirla en toda su intensidad para que decidamos juntos, el país entero o el planeta entero, que ese no es un dolor tolerable. Gracias y espero alguna vez estar junto con ustedes.
Pues va, un fuerte abrazo a Julian, lo que nos acaba de contar. Y me quedo mucho con esta parte de lo que la violencia y la violencia digital significa también como dolor. O sea, yo creo que lo que más trasciende de lo que nos cuenta de su experiencia es esto, el dolor, dice la brutalidad, dice el cómo te vas sintiendo menos. Este grito dice que no puede ser solitario, pero cómo se va sufriendo. Y en muchas ocasiones, quienes hemos sufrido también de esta violencia digital, pues hay quienes te dicen, no pasa nada, solo es Twitter o solo son las redes, no pasa nada. No, sí pasa, y sí hay afectaciones personales que son muy fuertes. Así que, pues gracias por este testimonio y te pido, Sherry, si vamos contigo, por favor, adelante.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here, a part of this panel, and particularly listening to Julian just a moment ago. What I was thinking was, this is horrible. This is awful. How can human beings do this? And then, but I'm not surprised. This is the sort of thing that the digital universe has become. It's a cruel place. And I want to talk about some ideas about things we need to keep in mind as we struggle with this issue of digital violence and digital aggression. And the first is that aggression is in the human DNA. It's part of our composition, our biology as humans. And that means when you think back to our ancestors, over long periods of time, we've invented more and more lethal, frightening ways to inflict this kind of violence. And now we have a new tool in the arsenal. So it's important to realize that humans do have a need and a skill for aggression that maybe we have outgrown, but it's part of our biology. The other thing is that belonging, being part of something, is also a human need. When you think back to an infant, a human infant, they can't survive without others, without family, without nurturance from people around them. And that continues through our lives. We are a social species as well. So belonging is another basic human need that affects what's happening. We'll get there. Human groups are also hierarchical. There's a ladder, and we talk about that. The person at the top is the boss or the king or the president or whoever, but then we have layers. And this need for power and status is also another human trait that's important and comes from our ancestry. Perhaps we're early man and there's a cannibalistic creature coming for us. We need to do something and we need to do it quickly. If we sit down and have a consensus and a debate and a discussion, we might all be dead. So we need to have a way to a hierarchy of power and decision making. Interestingly, recent research in particular has tried to identify personality traits, that are common among people who commit digital aggression. And it's a little scary because the trait that has repeatedly been shown to be very closely associated with digital aggression is sadism, an enjoyment of others' suffering, which to me is very frightening to think that there are that many people who think that way. Also, they find that narcissism is associated and psychopathy, but not as strongly as sadism. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going around torturing people every day, but there's something in their makeup, in their personality, that leads them to be pleased when they see someone else suffering. Also, it's important to know that negative, hostile, offensive content, whether it's on a news site or in social media, is seen, viewed, liked, shared. It's spread very quickly, much more so than neutral or positive. And that's important when we think about who makes money and how they make money. So the more likes, the more viewers, the more advertisers will support their venture. So if the offensive, derogatory, cruel posts are what do that, social media companies say, okay. The digital universe isn't very closely regulated in most parts of the world. And as a result, there's very little constraint on the kinds of content. There are rules, but they're easily broken and they're easily evaded. And the mechanisms to try to control that are ineffective at best. We have artificial intelligence, we have human moderators. They can't manage the volume with the amount of personnel they have right now. So I want to talk for a bit about some theories, psychological theories that have been proposed to kind of explain cyber aggression. And the best known one is called the online disinhibition effect. And this was proposed in 2004, which becomes important because think about when most of the big social media sites became widely used, and that's after that. anyway, his idea is that when we're online, we're anonymous. And so the rules that apply in our real life or our offline life somehow don't apply. We feel freer to break those rules, to do things that we would never do face to face. So the anonymity is a key part of that theory. The other thing is that they feel as though this theory suggests that we have compartments in our mind. We compartmentalize and say, here's our online self and here's our offline self. And they're not the same. So when I do things online that maybe I wouldn't do in face to face, it doesn't matter. It's not me. It's this other me. And that's essentially what his theory was about. But something to keep in mind is that the anonymity that's sort of the focus of this theory doesn't always hold water, because a lot of the really awful stuff that you see is not anonymous. In fact, if you think about striving for power and status, you won't get it if they don't know who you are. Part of it is to show your digital muscle, to show how offensive you can be, how frightening you can be. And so anonymity is not as prevalent for this kind of material as we would think. There was a study in Germany, and they looked at a political news site, and there were comments. They had specific pieces of news that had occurred, and they asked people to comment on them. And most of them had various bias-based overtones to them. And of the people who were supporting the racist comments, 90% showed supportive comments. Only 9% were opposing. So the power of this really nasty stuff is very disturbing and scary to think about how we might address this and reduce it. Another theory you might know, the Freudian theory of personality, which is the id, ego, and superego. The id is the instinctive primitive self. It's all instinct and things that we don't think about, and they're part of us, like the things we need to survive. And then that particular component of our personality wants to be gratified right now. I'm not going to wait. But then we developed an ego, which is a rational part of ourself that is able to negotiate and say, you know, id, I recognize that you want this and you think you need it, but it's not appropriate in the social context that we're in. So the ego acts as an inhibitor for these instincts, for these things that we don't even think about and just do. And then the third component is a superego, which is our moral conscience. And that's the question that I ask all the time. How can people do this? What kind of people are these? And there's so many of them. What kind of species are we? And then I came upon the theory of moral disengagement. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And the first is we all have a sense, our own values of what's right and what's wrong. That's part of who we are. And then sometimes we're in a situation where there's a temptation to do something that we know is wrong. We know it's wrong. So we use moral justification. We say to ourselves, well, this ultimate goal, the cause, is so important that it's okay for me to do this because I'm doing it for a good purpose. For example, most people would say it's wrong to kill someone, right? Except when I go to war and I'm defending freedom, then it's okay. So we do that. And some people are conscientious objectors and would not do that. But for many people, this higher purpose, defending something that they believe in, allows them to go against their own values. And another one that's important is, I don't? Oh, okay. I can talk for days about this stuff, and I'm sorry. And I timed myself, but somehow it's gotten away from me, and I apologize for that. Anyway, be aware that that these people who do this don't necessarily believe that they are doing a bad thing. They're saving the world, or they're doing something really positive. And there are other kinds of tricks we play on ourselves to do it. And if we don't address those, it's very difficult to get people to change their behavior. So given that I've exceeded my time, I just want to say that in order to address this, I believe that one of the most important things is for social media companies and governments to get together and put some regulations, reasonable regulations, restrictions, so that this doesn't happen as easily and as often. It's harmful. We heard from Mr. Fuchs how harmful this is, and he's not the only one. So keep those things in mind if you would, and thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sherry. And yes, we could talk about this for a very long time, but we don't have that much time. Pero yo creo que es muy importante algunas de las cosas que estaba planteando Sherry cuando habla, digamos, de algunas como características, cuando hablas de la agresión, cuando hablas de la necesidad de pertenecer, de la jerarquía y lo que significa la distribución del poder. Pero me llamó también mucho la atención lo que decías sobre el sadismo, el gusto de ver sufrir a otros, ¿no? El estar insistiendo en esto, en tener hasta que haya un placer, digamos, de ello, más allá de lo narcisista, que a veces es lo que más se enuncia. Y bueno, pues esto de qué es lo que se puede hacer. Me impresionó un poco esto de cómo compartimentalizamos el asunto, ¿no? Es decir, yo puedo ser de cierta manera en el mundo físico, y comportarme de cierta manera, pero en el mundo digital puedo ser un monstruo, ¿no? O sea, y cómo lo acomodo en mi vida. Siempre he pensado cuando me preguntan cómo le podemos bajar al odio, yo siempre digo, tenemos que vernos más a los ojos. Es mucho más difícil estarte agrediendo si te veo a estarte agrediendo si estoy en línea. Y el problema es que como nos hemos dejado de ver, eso hace también que sea mucho más fácil agredirnos. Precisamente por esto, esta compartimentalización. Gracias y voy ahora contigo, Rasha, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. I see a lot of young people, and I'm working with youth on what we call the prevention of radicalization and violent extremism. So with all the respect that I have for older people, I will discuss with the youth today because I think what I'm going to tell them is for them, before us. So what is violent radicalization and extremism? I will give you, there's no one definition about it because it depends on each country context and environment context. But let's say I will give a scientific definition of this just to understand what I'm working on. And let me give the definition of a professor and researcher, French researcher that I always work with, and he defines radicalization by leading to violence. We have to make the difference between radicalization and radicalization leading to violence. It's a process. We don't become radicalized in 24 hours. It's a long process that starts with a cognitive situation, and then it comes to behavioral and so on. And this process is considered as we have a group, individuals, a group can be a state, a government also, that have an extreme belief system, and they want to use it by expressing it through violence so that they achieve the transformation of society or people according to their own beliefs. And as we say, this is what we call radicalization or a violent extremism. What I am working with youth, like 20 years ago, we thought that the problem was a security problem, that we are going to solve this problem only through a security department and we'll arrest people and we will end up with this kind of violence. But the approach today, it's multidisciplinary. I am a researcher in science of education, and I am creating what we call pedagogical tools for prevention. This is my field of research. We have psychologists with us. We have sociologists. We have people working in media. We have computer sciences people. We have all this synergy this is the approach to prevent. And I don't have answer to tell you that we can stop violence. I have good practices. I don't have answers. I don't have solution. I have what we call good practices that we can use to prevent, to make this prevention and try with our youth to tell them about being aware of the danger of the internet and of how we can be recruited, indoctrination through the internet. And today, all of us, it's not a youth because it's not only the young people. I have a double life, one virtual and one online and one offline myself. So it's the two us, the two me, that they have to be in cohesion with each other. That's why today we are talking about virtual citizenship, digital citizenship. We are talking about this digital values and how to be a citizen, also a good citizen on internet as we are good citizen in real life. You have to know something else, that with the tools that we are creating, I'm creating it in an environment with at least some democratic values so that it can be feasible. In a situation where we don't have a democratic environment, it's very difficult to apply these tools. But it doesn't mean that we will say it's a hopeless case. It's not a hopeless case because education can come from home, from schools, from people around you, from society. But it's true that today I wanted to talk about hate speech. Maybe I will talk it later. But the case of Julian, I will give it the example that hate speech today, you know that in international law, we don't have a definition of hate speech. Hate speech has no definition in an international law. We have what we call at the United Nations, if I can say it's the United Nations definition, it's all kind or type of communication, whether oral or written, offline or online, constituting an attack, as the case of Julian, or using derogatory or discriminatory language against a person or a group because of their color, political thinking, sexual orientation, gender, all the list that we all know. This is what we call hate speech, but we don't have in international law the real definition of hate speech. And what Julian have lived, it's kind of this impact that we use to fight people. Or today the war is on internet. The war against democracy is on an internet. The war against freedom is on internet, because not only it's true that all the youth, young people are internet. Even my 10-year-old boy today, he's using games, you know, this Nintendo, I don't know what games, and I'm watching it because even through games now you can go into conversation, and we are using games to disseminate extremist ideas. So what we are doing with youth, first of all, is to explain them in a very scientific way how we can catch you. Whatever you type on the internet, the word that you are looking for, the answer that you want, there's this algorithm that we use to catch you, to say, he's interested in this subject. I'm going to make a conversation with him. And they will lead you if you are what we call the young at risk. You know what the young at risk, this youth at risk? The youth at risk are those youth in general who has an environment that makes them fragile, either politically, socially, economically, psychologically. the age of the teenager are a very, very good target for hatred and so on. And I will just give a last example about the case of Julian. What did they do with Julian? How can we disseminate on internet a hate speech? We have the founder of an idea. They decided that Julian is a terrorist. If I understood the Spanish. Okay, they decided. So the idea is here. We have a group called the founders. They have the idea. And then we have a group that will disseminate on the internet the idea, which we call the propagators. Okay, and we, unfortunately, the people are the actors. By sharing, by commenting, by liking what they said, we are destroying a person like Julian, and he becomes the terrorist. Because the disseminator or propagators, when they disseminate these ideas, they will give you the fake misinformation about Julian. So you, as a young, as a person, not only you don't have that idea about him. You don't know what's happening. You don't know even what is a terrorist or the real definition of a terrorism. So you become actors by sharing your actors, by commenting your actors, by liking what they say your actors. So you are participating in all this. So this is an example. I would have liked to give you more and more time about this, but I don't, I have no time, but we will discuss if you have any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasha. Sí, es un tema fascinante y sobre todo la forma como Rasha nos lo estaba planteando, cómo todos terminamos involucrados, ¿no? Aunque no hayamos sido los originales, no fuimos los que creamos la historia de que alguien es un terrorista y que por lo tanto hay que atacarlo, pero cómo uno termina también implicado en este fluir, digamos, de la información, aunque no sepas ni siquiera de quién están hablando, ¿no? O no tengas idea ni siquiera, pero terminamos siendo parte de esta espiral. Y nos queda ya muy poquito tiempo, pero me gustaría a las dos, Sherry y Rasha, tal vez preguntarles un poco, bueno, ¿qué podemos hacer? Decías, Sherry, hace rato hablabas de regulación, de que los gobiernos y las compañías digitales o de tecnología deberían de hacerlo, pero ¿qué se puede hacer? Si pensamos que, por ejemplo, Twitter ahora está en manos de un Elon Musk, que lo que quiere es que todo fluya y que no haya ningún tipo de límites ni nada, más bien pareciera que estamos caminando en otra dirección. Entonces, me gustaría tal vez un ejemplo, Sherry, de algo que podamos hacer, y lo mismo para ti, Rasha. ¿Qué podemos hacer? Un ejemplo de qué podemos hacer. Sherry.
I can tell you that in England, they have much stronger regulations around hate speech and other types of digital violence, and there are penalties. People have served jail time. They've been fined for breaking the law, and that I don't like to think of things in a punitive way, but it seems like there's no other way to do this, and also to draw parameters around what's acceptable. It just seems as though it's like the Wild West in the US when they were expanding the country and there were no sheriffs and no anybody to enforce anything. So people did whatever they wanted. And the companies are in this to make money, and they're making billions of dollars when you read about it. They're not going to on their own decide to make any kind of meaningful changes in the way those sites operate. And I think ideally, I would hope that governments, not just in one country, because, for example, a lot of the social media companies are located in the US, but they're used all around the world, that if those companies and governments and interested citizens, the community, would have a genuine dialogue, as you say, face to face, talk about the pros and cons, listen to each other, and be open to, maybe I have to change my opinion just a little bit on this. It's not going to happen overnight, but I hope there's enough outrage expressed when we see a situation like the one Julian experienced, that people will be motivated to take a stand and advocate for these actions.
Thank you, Sherry. Rasha?
So I will be back to my academic here, just to give you some good practices that we will use. First of all, we have to raise awareness of the cyber hate practices on the net. How can we? What are the practices using to raising awareness? Sorry. And then the risk of fake news, misinformation. This can be done at the school level, at early age. A third point can be the recall of the principle of the citizen action to report hatred speech. What does it mean? That means that when you are on the internet and you see as young or as adults, for instance, this is what I say even to the young, very young people. You see a video where someone is being bullied or someone is doing something harmful, report them, be actors. Don't just watch and say it's okay, because this is what we call viral. It will nourish other young people who are not having this awareness about the risk of internet. The thing also, which is very important, young people, they don't like people coming and talking to them all the time. Do this and be careful. Internet is no. What she's saying, okay. Young people want to be protagonists. They want to be actors. What I am creating, I'm not creating by myself. I'm creating it with young people. I created with a group of high school students a conspiracy video. We made a conspiracy video to deconstruct and to understand how we can make conspiracy videos. And they were very proud of it. And I did what we call evaluation after and before and after the video, and they understood the mechanism. Young people want to be in the creation of these actions. They want to be actors. They not want to be passive and listening to you and the boring professor is there. Then be careful, don't use internet. It's not this. It's they want to be listened to. They want to be actors. They want to be involved in society and be taken into consideration. Now we are talking, for instance, about agora spaces where young people with different views, because there's a say that says, my freedom stops when it starts annoying your freedom. It means that as long as we respect each other's freedom, we can, we should not agree on everything. If not, it's boring. That's it. But how to respect each other's freedom and how to express our ideas without using violence, and what we call today the resistance. We are talking about resistance. What is resistance? Is you can express your ideas, but please don't use violence. And violence is not physical. What happened to Julian is violence. What's happening as bullying is violence. Telling someone and hating someone for his color or for his gender or for sexual orientation is violence. All these are forms of violence. And so just respect, know your rights, and fight for them. Just express yourself, forget about violence. And people will listen to you if you can convince them. That's it. What we can do.
Creo que se nos fue el tiempo, pero creo que podríamos hacer una pregunta. Si alguien quiere hacer una pregunta, creo que sí nos da todavía. No sé si alguien por acá quiere hacer alguna pregunta o algún comentario a lo que estamos comentando aquí en la mesa. Porque yo creo que de alguna manera nos estamos implicando y nos vemos implicados todos. A ver, acá veo una pregunta. Sí. Sí.
Buenas noches. Mi pregunta sería para la señorita Bauman. Ella nos mencionó hace un momento que en Inglaterra se tienen medidas en contra del discurso de odio. Y mi pregunta sería, ¿cómo podrían hacer para evitar que esto se vea? Muchas veces la gente tiende a relacionar esto como con una forma de represión y siempre sacan aquellas palabras de que es como en el libro 1984 de George Orwell. Pensaba yo, ¿cómo podría lidiarse con esto sin que la gente sintiera que se le está censurando y entendiera que se le está diciendo para evitar que digan estos discursos de odio? Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you for that question. And it's really the very crux of the issue. We have freedom of speech. We don't want to be censored. That's an important human right. But on the other hand, as Rasha just said, when you infringe on someone else's right to live safely, to work without fear, I wonder whether we have to just define what freedom means and where its limits are. Even in the United States, where freedom of speech is used to excuse a lot of reprehensible behavior, there are limits. There are cases that have been prosecuted for saying things. So there are ways to approach this. I also would like to reflect on something Rasha said, which is report. And I always say report to the site, report to your internet service provider, report to the authorities, report to the school. But that assumes that those people will take action. And it's very discouraging when someone makes a report and documents and saves all the details that shows the hate speech that's being promulgated and nothing happens. And those are up to the site, not the government. They can make restrictions. I had a situation in our university and I reported it and it was too bad. They have the right to say that. So it's a fine line, and I think that's why we really need to talk carefully about how to have free speech, but also have safe, the right for people to be safe.
Sí, porque es presuponer que la libertad de expresión es absoluta y no es absoluta, ¿no? Y yo creo que la discusión que debemos de tener es eso, ¿cuáles son los límites a la libertad de expresión? ¿Cuáles son los límites que aceptamos de manera colectiva, ¿no? a la libertad de expresión sin que sea censura, pero sí hay límites, ¿no? O sea, no es una libertad absoluta. Y yo creo que muchas veces nos sucede eso, que creemos que tenemos el derecho a decirlo sin medir las consecuencias de lo que significa decir algo o hacer un video o compartir algún contenido. Me parece muy buena pregunta. Bueno, una más por acá, sí.
Te escucho, Gabriela, y me pregunto si no estamos confundiendo libertad de expresión con esa ansiedad del yo de la que hablaba Sherry, ¿no? De hacer un retweet no puede ser equiparable con libertad de expresión. La libertad de expresión implica, digamos, construcción de argumento, implica construcción de idea, implica, porque me preocupa mucho esta línea delgada de la que habla Sherry, de que podemos ponerle límites a la libertad de expresión, cuando realmente de lo que padeció Julian no fue libertad de expresión, fue acoso masivo, indistinto, sin ser considerado como ser humano, víctima de una reacción colectiva en masa sin control, ¿no? Entonces, no sé si estamos hablando realmente de libertad de expresión o estamos hablando de reacciones compulsivas en Twitter o en redes, ¿no?
Es un buen punto, ¿no? No sé, Sherry, si tengas algo al respecto, pero sí, y creo que además desde la psicología es interesante verlo, ¿no? Es decir, cómo si entras en un círculo de acoso y de violencia digital, ¿eso qué es? Eso fue digamos, como, no sé, como una explosión del yo, o qué fue, ¿no? Es una buena pregunta.
Well, I don't want to take a lot of time because I see there's another question, but one of those is we do have these instinctive, even aggressive traits, but we also learn as we grow and develop how to inhibit those when it's appropriate. And it's very tricky. It's a fine line that we're talking about, and finding that line is really the challenge. And we haven't gotten there yet. But we need to continue the dialogue. We need to acknowledge that the pain and suffering that this kind of behavior causes. I've seen it with numbers of people unfortunately, like Julian, that shouldn't happen. That just shouldn't happen.
Buena acotación. Dos más, nada más, sí, porque ahora sí ya se nos fue el
There's
tiempo.
someone back in the back who's been,
Hola, yo tenía una pregunta que hablan sobre, bueno, las dos un poco sobre la regulación de que a lo mejor del gobierno, sobre el discurso de odio o el bullying, y quería ver si alguna nos pudiera dar una opinión, ya que ustedes son extranjeras, que mucho, cómo es como nuestros retos como ciudadanos, nosotros aquí en México, donde viene, en ocasiones viene desde nuestro gobierno, hay actores, nuestros gobernantes entran en estos discursos, en estas dinámicas. Entonces, si nosotros lo estamos viendo desde nuestro gobierno, desde nuestros gobernantes, ¿cuál es nuestro reto como ciudadanía de identificar o de atacar esto? Porque aquí en México, pues, nos pasa.
Muy bien, buena pregunta.
and elsewhere,
Sí,
like the
sí,
United States.
sí.
I think that's
Ah.
very damaging because these people are role models. And when people see this, they behave that way. Why shouldn't I?
Russia?
Yeah, the situation, as you said, is the challenge is bigger when the government itself is the one who is spreading. I'm not talking about a special country, but I mean the case of Julian, the one who are spreading hate. And this, as we see, it's not the case only in some country, but you can see that in Europe today, the growth of far-right extremism and discourse. And if you, as someone who lives in France, in the last elections, presidential election, and I come back to freedom of expression, we had someone called Eric Zemmour, this far-right extremist who used a discourse of hate under the name of freedom of expression. And he used this tool, especially on a security issue, migration, refugees, people that coming, they are not French, change your names, you know, all this movement that is growing now against different people or minorities and so on. And when the environment, the general environment has at least a basic democratic values, it's easier to fight hate speech. But when there's no a basic democratic value, values, yes, in a country, it's the challenges is bigger. And the challenges is for you people to use among you in the society to transform the society by using the methods that you can use and fight as Julians and other peoples, because we cannot change the world unless we can take the responsibility to take the risk with some governments, some regimes, and fight for this, because we are fighting for freedom of speech, but at the same time, as we say, the fine line that freedom of speech also can be used against us, and the roles can be reversed. And today we have the roles reversed in many countries, not only in my country of origins. We had this roles for 40 years, the roles reversed. So I know what is having a system, a dictatorship system. But this is the way the challenge is bigger, especially in education. But I will say it's the responsibility of educators, of journalists, of media, of families, of friends, of activists to work for it. There's a risk, but this is the thing that we should pay to get our freedom.
Bueno, gracias. Yo creo que ya, ya llegamos, sí,
No hay problema.
ya llegamos al final de la mesa, y ya antes de que, porque vamos a quedarnos horas, ¿eh? La verdad es que hay como muchísimos temas. Y bueno, como lo dijo Nicolás desde el principio, no tratamos de poner respuestas, sino más bien abrir las preguntas, ¿no? Yo creo que, lo decía un poco Rasha hace rato, de pronto no hay una única respuesta para todo esto, sino es contextual, tiene que ver también con el lugar en el que estamos y con lo que estamos viviendo. Así que, bueno, yo apunté como loca, ahora sí que me llevo muchas más preguntas de las que tenía al principio, pero bueno, gracias Nicolás por abrir estos foros. Thank you very much, Sherry, and thank you very much, Rasha, y gracias a todos ustedes.
Thank you.
Gracias.